Well, I've shared with many of you before. My dad passed away in 2011, and my mom's reaction was she was mad. She was mad at him for leaving before she felt it was his time. And
Yeah.
I understand that feeling. The other thing she was mad about is that he left her going through a process called probate. She didn't know much about it before, but boy, does she know about it now. And our next guest is here to shine some light on the topic.
Absolutely. Here to remove the insult from the injury is Whitney Short. She is an attorney with Borg Law Group. It's great to have you, Whitney. How are you?
Hi, well, thanks for having me.
So there are people that have experienced probate and they hear it, they're like, oh, and there are people that haven't experienced it yet. So for those who haven't experienced it yet and need an education really fast, explain what probate is.
Yeah, so probate is a court process that happens when somebody passes away with assets in their individual name. So the assets aren't owned by a trust or they're not co-owned and they don't have a beneficiary on them.
Hmm.
It's interesting. For my mom, it was a lot of trips to a lawyer, and well over a year. What is the usual process? How long does it usually take?
So it really depends on the assets, but you can bet on at least 6 months and it can go on for years depending on the asset.
Hmm.
Mm.
So let's say you do have some stuff that's in your name solo, but you want to make sure that, heaven forbid, you do evacuate the planet. You are giving that stuff to someone and it's kind of easy peasy at the end of it. How can we avoid probate and make it as easy as possible on our family members?
Yeah, so that's a typical question that a lot of people want to know the answer to because nobody wants to be in probate, right? So there are a few different things that you can do. First, you could have a trust that holds all of your assets. Second, you could own them with somebody else. So if you pass away, it's still owned by another person. And lastly, you can name a beneficiary on the item. A lot of assets you can actually add a beneficiary to so that if something happens to you, that beneficiary then is the owner.
Whitney, I think it can be a little bit confusing for those of us who don't live in the legal world and we're not super familiar with these terms all the time. It just, to me, it's confusing. Well, wait, I have a will. I've said who I want everything to go to. Why isn't
Yeah,
it just super simple?
that's what I was thinking.
But yeah, having a will doesn't always mean that you can avoid probate.
Yeah, so that's a common misconception that we get a lot. People will say, I have a will. That means I'm fine, right? Unfortunately, the will just tells the court where you want your property to go after you pass away. So it doesn't actually catch any assets. You still go through the probate process with a will. It just gives guidance to the court on where your property goes.
So it could possibly make it
Mm.
slightly easier, but it's still a pain, is what you're saying.
Hmm.
Okay, let's say I don't have a will, and the probate's there, and it just gets a little confusing. Does the state end up getting my property? Heaven forbid I pass away. Is the state of Nevada just going to take all my stuff?
So that's another misconception that we get a lot. The state of Nevada usually won't get your property. It doesn't escheat to the state of Nevada, meaning go to the
Usually.
state of Nevada. Usually, unless there are no other heirs or unless they can't find any heirs. So it's usually a last case scenario. But a lot of people think that it just goes to the state if you don't have a will. That's not the case. Usually, there's a statute that says how your property goes.
Gotcha.
Interesting. Whitney, we love having you on the show. Thanks for answering these questions. We know you're an attorney with Borg Law Group. I mean, is this common for people just to rapid fire questions at you when it comes to wills and probate? Because I feel like we've just, kind of touched the iceberg there.
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into it. I just touched a little bit onto the major points and a lot of the misconceptions that people come to me with, but there are a lot of things that you need to consider when planning for your estate.
Yeah, if you have actually some stuff of value, you're going to want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. How long does it take to get a good probate plan into action? Is this something that's going to take just as long on the or before side than it would on the after side, or no?
So no, and that's the point of doing it, right? So you can have an estate plan put into place. We usually get our estate plans done within a week, sometimes two, and that's all of the documents that you would need for during your lifetime and then after.
Fantastic. All right.
It's interesting too. I think, Sean, you and Marcia have probably discussed this. Bill and I have as well. It's like, at what point in your life do you have to get serious about, hey, we need to, establish a trust, or we need to, certainly, any married couple really should have a will. Don't you
Yeah.
advise that?
Yeah, and if you're over 18, you should at least have powers of attorney because your parents no longer get to make those decisions for you after you're 18. But then when you start getting older, planning, you can always plan too late, but you can't ever plan too early.
No doubt.
Mhm.
Whitney, it's great having
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much for joining
Thanks,
us.
Whitney.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Whitney with Borg Law Group. You can go to borglawgroup.com. They're there on West Cheyenne. And if you want to learn more, their website right there on your screen. Borg Law Group, a proud sponsor of the Morning Blend.